Hey everyone, Warwick's here. So we got some new Mythic Plus news. The last boss of Arkara City of Echoes has been nerfed, Bubble's location has been moved, and some other dungeon tuning that has come out for the next set of Season 3 dungeons. So we're going to take a look at this. Spoiler, I've kind of looked at these already. I know most of them are what most of them are, and let's just say I'm not upset about them. So let's go over these changes and let's kind of talk about what I think the impact is going to be overall. So they are going to, number one, they don't say it here, but they actually did in another day or two on the new dungeon. So that's been going through. I did get to play it once. Forgot to record the gameplay, but it wasn't very good anyways because no clue what was going on. So this week we're going to be looking at the returning dungeons is what we're going to be testing. So I'll definitely try to find time to get in this week. Friday I might have some time on my hands because I'm off work for Americans Independence Day until I go to meet my family that evening. So I might do that, play some BTR, and then I'm looking to do a Final Fantasy stream. Anyways, let's look at the number one update to this dungeon. So waystones have been added to the dungeons and many checkpoints have been adjusted. So we're going to take that. I apologize for this music. Let me crank that down. Figured with the Mist of Pandaria Classic pre-patch releasing yesterday as I record this, that we would celebrate a little bit with one of the better soundtracks in WoW's history, in my opinion. So these waystones have been added in now, so it's just going to make those updated checkpoints a lot better. We'll see exactly where they're at once they get in and determine whether or not they actually chose good spots or not, but I imagine they should be mostly after every boss, in my opinion. We'll find out. Alright, Arkara has gotten just a swath of updated visual adjustments, and they did some adjustments to the last ball, Kikatal the Harvester. But on the way over there, you get the Trilling Attendant. Their Web Boat and Resonant Barrage are now both Nature School, which means that they can be things like Silenced Out. Before, for some reason, they were classified as physical, so you couldn't do that. You could kick them, but you couldn't do anything else. It was really weird. Bloodstained Assistant no longer casts Extraction Strike immediately upon entering combat. That is probably a good thing. That was a kind of a nasty tank buster move that, particularly thinking about things like DK, Prop Paladin, and lesser extent Guardian Druid would just get absolutely destroyed by, because they don't have any mitigation up if they're pulled into that pack immediately. So really good change there. The Reinforced Drone no longer casts Grasping Slash, which I'm also okay with. That's again another kind of murky tank buster that was not clear if it was single target or AoE, things like that. So we just get an opportunity to mess with that a little bit. Alright, and the changes to Kikatal the Harvester. This is the last boss of Arkara. The Cultivated Poisons now target 3 players down from 5, so that's going to make things like dispelling a lot better. Because this boss was absolute high levels of toxicity for melee in particular, and melee-based healers, looking at you, Paladin and Mistweaver. To where you just kind of, if you were like a full melee stack, you were not having fun. I'll just be honest, you were having to run out all the time and watch your positioning all the time, and you lose so much damage and extend the fight so much. So much as a result. I'm recording this at 11:30 at night because I'm an idiot. But so getting it down to 3 players is good. I think they should probably always do it on tank and then 2 DPS. Leave the healer alone. So hopefully it's not like random. I'd rather them fixate who it goes on, like he always does the tank and then 2 out of the 3 DPS every time, just because I think that makes a fight that's already stressful on healers, particularly like a Presovoker hates that fight because everyone's so spread out, makes things a little bit better. Cultivated Poisons wave, initial damage reduced by 50%, but now inflicts additional damage over 5 seconds. So this is if you get hit by the poison wave. It would do something like 7 million damage, which in Season 1 was enough to one-shot DPS. Now it's only going to do something like 3 million damage, but it's going to leave a dot over time, so your healer's still going to have to work on it, but it gives you an opportunity to defensive, self-heal, beg your healer, things like that. And then the Cosmic Singularity, which is the pull-in, gets a reduced 50% damage, and the duration of Faded increased to 20 seconds. I don't remember off the top of my head the Faded debuff, so if you remember what that is, throw that in the comments and let me know. So overall, good changes. I think Arakara is going to be probably the easiest key, because that dungeon, if you can do the first boss and you can do the last boss, that dungeon is free. Like, it is pretty free. The timer was tight mainly because of the last boss. It very much had a Tal Dazar syndrome. When a Tal Dazar came back, you'd clear the first 3 bosses and all your trash, and you'd have like 11 minutes left in the dungeon, and this was kind of regardless of key level. But then the last boss you'd wipe like twice, and then you'd time the key with like maybe a minute left. That was kind of what Kikatal the Harvester was doing, is that you'd go into that boss with like 10 or 11 minutes left, and then just wipe like 2 or 3 times, because that boss is so overly tuned and overly punishing. They pulled that boss back. I think that's a good thing. We'll see. I think, if I recall correctly, the timer was like 33 minutes. I think that's probably going to be a safe timer. And if it's longer than that, I expect them to eventually reduce it once we get key data going into the early part of the season. So Arakara, if you're looking for your sack brood, which a lot of specs will be, it's going to be a very easy key, I think, going forward, as long as you can kind of manage mainly the spider area in the beginning and then just adjust to this boss better. Dawnbreaker, again, got some visual clarity upgrades because they missed out on it when we were doing everything in Season 2, Season 3 now. Speaker Shadow Crown, that is the first boss. The Obsidian Beam initial damage is reduced by 33%, so again, this was a one-shot capability that also has a hidden tank buster underneath it, so hopefully they adjust that a little bit and go from there. But the fact that the beam does, hopefully will no longer one-shot, is going to be a good thing to me. Nightfall Shadow Walker, Umbra Brush no longer inflicts damage. That's really good, because it would just randomly charge your healer and damage dealers and one-shot them. And just, there was no counterplay. You couldn't do anything about it. You just died, and it would suck. And then no longer casting Dark Flows on the Manifested Shadow. That's going to reduce the amount of interrupts and stuns and stops that you need. So overall, Dawnbreaker was one of the easiest keys of Season 1. The Speaker Shadow Crown beam change, I think, is really good. Small little tweaks to some of the more notorious trash. The first boss, Shadow Crown, is still, I think, to me, is the biggest challenge in there. If you can get through that boss pretty cleanly, then the other 2 were pretty straightforward. Because that boss has a lot of space management, a lot of debuff management, a lot of positioning requirements. Like, it's the most complex boss in there. Like, the second boss, you just kind of stick your back to the fountain and roll it down the hill, and then gather up for when the ads come out so that your tank can easily gather them up. And then the third boss, rushing on, is like cake. Like, legitimately cake. Like, that is by far the easiest boss in that dungeon. Alright. Priory of the Sacred Flame made adjustments to offer more flexibility with routing in the courtyard of the Priory. So what happens right now in this dungeon is that people will basically pull most of the courtyard, but then always go left. Like, that's kind of the standard route, is that you go left, up the left side stairs, because the Forge Master is so ridiculously punishing that nobody messes with them. And so the route was very static. The only adjustments was, did you go down into the pit before the second mini-boss, or did you go around it, which is the route that I take. That said, the Arathi Knights, which are also going up that right side set of stairs, as well as are in that courtyard, they reduced the duration of the Impale, which is good, because it was like 18 seconds. So I think they're cutting off 6 seconds of that, making it a 12-second debuff, 12-second bleed. So, like, Dwarf, the Warrior ability, if you talent it, which right now you don't, and then Evokers could pull love off themselves once every minute. That thing was just overtly punishing. And the initial damage has been reduced by 25%, which is also good, because not only would you get this 18-second bleed that ticked for a lot of damage, it would chunk you to like 30% health. So that ability was just ridiculously overtuned. You manage it because of, like, luckily there's not a ton of other damage going out. unless you're pulling like 4 or 5 sharpshooters. So overall, good change to the Arathi Knight should make them a much more manageable mob. Shield Slam reduced by 33% on the mini boss Guard Captain Suleiman, and it can now be blocked, which is going to make warriors and paladins very happy. I'm assuming that it could be parried or dodged, but could not be blocked, which was kind of annoying. Now it can be, which is great. Forge Master Damien, who nobody ever pulls, maybe this change will allow us to do that. Health reduced by 15%. That's a huge nerf to his HP. And then his Heat Wave initial damage is reduced by 30%, but now inflicts that damage over time. So it just makes his counterplay much better, much more manageable. Anything that, like, the one thing that Blizzard is starting to slowly understand is that the rot damage is always more acceptable than just big one-shot damage. Like, I'd rather have, like, 8 events of, like, 500 damage versus 1 event of 5,000 damage. Like, I'd rather have that than, like, 8 ticks of a thing versus... Now, some healers aren't built to deal with rot damage all that great, and that's something that can be looked into. Like, I would argue Preservation Invoker doesn't handle rot damage all that well, because it bursts, like, you have to time the burst so that you heal everyone to full, but then they take a little bit more of the rot damage, so you have to do a second mini ramp in order to do it. It's annoying, but it is what it is. So maybe that brings Forge Master Damien into the books. I don't know. I'll have to test it this week with some go right strats and see what happens. The Light Spawn, which are the radiant light elementals that are in the second half of the dungeon after you kill the second boss. The Purification will now not target a player already affected by Purification. I love this change because nothing felt worse as a healer, as a DPS, than getting targeted by double Light Spawn and you just died. Like, you literally could not do anything. Unless you run with like a prop paladin who could spell ward you once every 5 minutes. So the fact that they now will always target different characters is a good thing in my opinion. Makes those mobs much more manageable and gives you the ability to pull them together a little bit more efficiently, which I think is a good thing because Prior has a pretty tight timer this season, and one of the big reasons is that things like the Light Spawn, you can't really pull more than one into a group because then you risk the heal going off and then just destroys your pacing. And the Purifications going onto the same person would just clap your team. So that one change I think will allow us to potentially pull some double Light Spawn, especially if you have some good CC options to get everything out of the heal. Captain Dalecry, Savage Mauling, and Cinderstorm will no longer be cast within 8 seconds of each other. So that is an interesting change. Because, like, it definitely helps reduce the, like, bursty AoE damage that comes out, so it's probably overall a good change. Hurl Spear replaced with Earth Shattering Spear. We'll find out what that does. And then the Pierce Armor duration was reduced from 10 seconds to 7 seconds. This is good. This is another bleed effect that goes purely on the tank. So some tanks can handle it just fine, like Brewmaster doesn't fucking care about it. Druid, in a sense, doesn't care about it. Vengeance Demon Hunter doesn't really care about fucking almost anything. But it absolutely destroyed Prot Paladin, Prot Warrior, and Blood DK. So, and it just lasted forever. And then as soon as it would go off, your healer would get, like, a global to heal you up, and then that bleed was back on. It was just ridiculous. So, reducing it to 7 seconds allows a little bit more counterplay for your healers, especially as we get into those higher keys where that bleed just really, really messes with particularly Prot Warriors. So, hey, little buff to Prot Warriors, which good, because I'm probably going to be playing one next season. And then Tainer Doomall no longer casts Cinder Blast, and Cinderstorm duration reduced from 6 seconds to 4 seconds. So the removal of Cinder Blast is definitely a good thing. That was kind of an annoying spell. Ember Storm is still going to be around, so that'll be a thing. So now you're just focused on kicking his fireballs, and he's kind of a free mini boss now at this point if you just do the Cinder stuff. And then the Cinderstorm duration reduced from 6 seconds to 4 seconds. Perfectly fine. This was basically like if you did this combo where you didn't kill Dumal, instead you went and killed Suleiman and Damien. This combo was like gross, but like not a ton of people were doing it. So we'll see now if these changes make it so that you run Damien and then you have Dumal and Dalecry, if that changes anything. Overall, I think these changes definitely do make the timer in Priory a little bit more forgiving. I don't think they need to mess with it just because these changes alone are going to do it, plus all the extra power that we're going to be getting, if they tune the K value right. All right, let's look at Floodgate. Big Mama. So first or second boss, depending on the route that you take. The Electric Crush initial damage is reduced by 20%. That is the tank buster on this. I think that's fine. Like, I didn't really, like... I've played on Brewmaster, I've played on Prot Warrior, and I've played on Prot Paladin this season in that boss at varying gear levels and varying key levels. And I've never really had an issue with that. But it could be a thing where, like, DH or Blood DK or whatever could be just getting crushed. Alright, the time before Big Mama casts Kill a Block Barrier has been increased by 5 seconds, so that just makes it so that... I mean, ideally on this boss, you kill all the ads before she ever gets to the barrier and gives yourself that 90% reduction. Now it just gives you a little bit more freedom to get a little bit of extra cleave damage onto her while you're killing those ads. That's probably a good... I think that's a fine change. It seems fair. But, I mean, your priority should be the ads on that anyways in order to get your damage amp phase going. The Loaderbot ads. The wind-up cast time is increased by 100%. This is good. It was like a 1 second cast. It was ridiculous, or 1.5. And it just felt like, especially if you were standing on top of him in his melee, you just had no counterplay. And then it got a straight-up 25% damage reduction, which is also good because, again, this thing destroyed melee. And there was no counterplay to it because you would barely be able to, like, between trying to kick the, you know, Pyromancers and the... getting the architects down and the scaffolding coming up, and like your nameplates just didn't always catch the Loaderbot stuff, so happen to appreciate that change. Alright, Venture Company Architects, speaking of the architects, now place their scaffolding in a consistent location. I think that's a good change. Sometimes they would go like right where they were standing, sometimes it would be like 5 yards away. It just made no sense, so I like that. Adjusted the composition of the pack guarding the weapon stockpile near Big Mama. So this was the Blood Warper with Double Warrior and it's like soldiers, I think. If they took the Blood Warper out, then I think that is probably fine because like doing those back to back is kind of gross. So we'll see. I'll have to get into the PTR and find out what they're going to be doing on that. And then, of course, Bubble's location has been adjusted. It doesn't say where. I haven't seen any official reports as to where it's going to be at. So instead of being on that bridge, I get the feeling it's going to be on that platform to where you can't skip it. I think that's the number one thing, is they don't want you skipping Bubbles. But then I hope they do some things to tweak that mob, because it does a little too much damage and has slightly too much health, in my opinion. So we'll see. These last two changes are going to be completely, like, once we see them in PTR, we'll be able to judge them better. But these changes, I think, are all good. I think the Priory changes are very good. The Dawnbreaker changes are very good. And Arakar, I think, is going to be probably one of the easiest keys of this season. So, depending on what we do with the Tatavesh stuff. So overall, I'm really happy with these changes. I think these are nice changes. Like, a lot of people argue, like, oh, they're making the dungeons way too easy. I actually don't agree. I think the dungeons themselves are still going to be plenty hard. It's just going to be now a matter of smoothing out. This is a lot of smoothing out of the edges. The things that were the true, like, main pain points for players across all levels are now being addressed, and I think that's a good thing. So let me know what you think about these set of Mythic Plus changes below. Remember to like, share, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff. Do whatever you can. Hit the algorithm on it. I'm on the road to, I think, 1,200 subscribers is the next major 100-person milestone. I would love to get there soon. So I appreciate any support that you'd be open to giving me, whether it's just liking and commenting or actually going down and hitting that subscribe button. So until the next video, I hope you all stay safe. Hope you enjoy yourself. You're having fun. You keep on gaming. We'll see you next time.